You are listening to The Dish on Health IT, brought to you by Point of Care Partners, a leading health IT consultancy. Each episode will feature a rotating panel of senior consultants and guests who will talk about trends and innovations in health IT, while also highlighting how organizations can leverage these advances to solve their business problems. Welcome to this special episode of The Dish on Health IT. This HIMSS25 recap features special guests Brian Bamberger, Point of Care Partners Life Sciences Lead, and Vanessa Candelora, Senior Consultant with POCP and Program Manager of the HL7 Gravity Project. They join host Tony Schueth, CEO of POCP, to discuss HIMSS25 and react to interviews taken from the HIMSS25 floor with key industry leaders. The discussion ranges from general HIMSS observations, the state of FHIR adoption, and the hype versus reality of AI. We hope you find this information and insights helpful and enjoy the episode. If you have ideas for future podcasts, email us at podcast@pocp.com or submit suggestions on our podcast page at pocp.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dish on Health IT, where we invite health IT innovators and catalysts to break down and discuss some of health IT's biggest and most exciting milestones. We at Point of Care Partners are health IT consultants who work with stakeholders across the healthcare ecosystem and are viewed as independent, objective, and trusted. I'm Tony Schueth, CEO of Point of Care Partners, and I'll be your host for this special HIMSS25 recap episode, where we'll dive into the major themes, including the latest on FHIR and interoperability, the role of AI in healthcare, and the growing focus on data privacy and consent management. Joining me today are some very special colleagues who were on the ground with me at HIMSS25. Brian Bamberger, a longtime colleague and friend who leads our life sciences team, will be lending his perspective on how advancements discussed at HIMSS25 may impact life sciences manufacturers. Also joining us today is Vanessa Candelora, a senior consultant with POCP and the program manager of the HL7 Gravity Project. She's a rising star in health IT and will be offering her perspectives on HIMSS from technology, standards, governance, and strategy for health tech vendors, payers, and provider networks. Before we jump into questions about HIMSS25, why don't the two of you introduce yourselves? Brian, why don't you go first?
Morning, Tony, and you all. I am Brian Bamberger. I lead the life sciences practice. I've been involved in the life sciences business for over 30 years. I'm happy to be here this morning. It was too many to count HIMSS meetings. I think my first one was in 1999. And so a veteran at trying to look at this and discern some bite-sized pieces that will come out of this and some insights.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Brian. Vanessa, can you go next?
Of course. Hi, I'm Vanessa Candelora. I'm a senior consultant with Point of Care Partners, and I'm the program manager for the Gravity Project, and I'm also a co-lead on the patient cost transparency use case within the Da Vinci Project under the HL7 Accelerator Program. This was I have not been to as many HIMSS as Brian. I've been in the healthcare technology industry for about 20 years, and I've had the pleasure of being able to present on the educational stages in the last 3 of 4 HIMSS over the years. This was my first Vegas HIMSS. And for those of you that love Vegas, power to you. I got lost so many times in those buildings, and I actually pride myself on someone that doesn't get lost. And so it was a very unfamiliar feeling to be as lost as I was in that Vegas maze. But I thought it was a great conference. So looking forward to this discussion today. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it as well, and appreciate you going, and just sort of representing us at the conference. So thank you all for joining me this week for the biggest health IT conference of the year. While most Dish on Health IT listeners are probably familiar with HIMSS, let's do a quick level set. HIMSS, or the Health Information and Management Systems Society, is a massive global conference that brings together tens of thousands of healthcare leaders, innovators, and experts to discuss the latest trends, challenges, and breakthroughs in health IT. From an interoperability and AI to data governance and patient privacy, HIMSS is where the future of healthcare is shaped. Whether you're a healthcare professional, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about how technology is transforming healthcare, understanding what happened at HIMSS25 is crucial. The discussions and innovations there have real-world implications for how care is delivered, how data is shared, and how we tackle some of healthcare's biggest challenges. I personally have lost count on how many HIMSS conferences I've attended over the years, like Brian, but it's easily the most important POCP event that we attend every year. We typically send about 10 team members, and it's always a mix of networking, learning, and gaining perspectives. Through sessions, hallway conversations, and deeper discussions, we get a pulse on how stakeholder perceptions are shifting, what's working or not, and where the industry is heading next. For today's discussion, we'll start with high-level observations from our co-hosts, then listen to some interviews I captured at HIMSS, and react to the points being made. After that, we'll dive into other trends or developments worth highlighting. So let's get started. Based on your HIMSS 2025, what were the most prominent themes or trends you observed? And this time we're going to go with ladies first. So Vanessa, any observations?
Sure. Thanks, Tony. So I think, I'm in this interoperability space primarily, and it continues to remain a really top focus. It was so great to hear from some of the leaders within HL7 FHIR and interoperability more broadly to really be thinking about what they're focused on their second or third or even fourth business problem or use cases to solve. Still working closely with their trusted partners and, really building on that initial success, while others in the audiences and the sessions I participated on were really, at the forefront. They're just jumping on the train for the first time and trying to understand what this interoperability word is really about. So it was great to see that dichotomy and kind of get out there and talk to people and experience what's happening out there in the real world. I really felt like trust and scalability and how to balance those things was a really big theme this year. And I know we'll hear some of that later on in this session as well. And then, figuring out your strategy. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. There was obviously a pretty significant lack of government presence at HIMSS this year in comparison to previous years. A lot of uncertainty around TEFCA and regulation direction in general. And so, lots of hallway conversations about that and sort of where we're moving the needle forward, working with the new administration and within organizations to be strategic and innovative with the regulations that are out there today.
Thanks for those observations. And you're right. There's those of us that have been there a lot, and then there are newbies. Brian, with your clients and, some of the folks that you hang out with, they tend to be more newbies. What are your observations of HIMSS and, what were their reactions?
So a first-time attendee is definitely overwhelmed with the complexity of both the facility and the discussions that are going on, and really needs some help and experience in planning what to see, what to do, and how to work through issues. And we've certainly helped some of our clients as they approached us to say, hey, can you help us? What are your tips? And certainly we went through that with them. I think that there's a renewed interest in life sciences, in pharmaceutical companies primarily, to assess this and see where the opportunities are. It may be something that they do every 2 or 3 years rather than every year, because I don't know that the industry is moving fast enough to really make a measurable difference for them or difference for them. And then, the overall impression was, hey, AI is going to solve all our problems, right? Every problem that the world has, AI is going to take care of it. And we'll talk some more about that as one of the key themes here. Some of it is real and some of it is hype. And it's really about digesting and separating the hype from the realness in the process as we go along. So I think those are the things I took away, and the clients that I talked to were involved with as well in terms of their observations.
And that separating realness from hype is one of the things that we're very much valued for. So Okay, so before we jump deeper into our own personal observations, let's hear from some of the folks I interviewed at HIMSS. First, let's hear from a few people who shared their HIMSS25 observations and the value they get out of attending.
So number one, the hugs, the handshakes, and high fives are the most important. That relationship building, that understanding that on the other side of the negotiating table is a human just like you. All those things are very important. And I think that's one of the highest values you bring home to your enterprises are the new connections. It's the golden rule, make new friends, keep the old, one is silver, one is gold. I think having that touch point here at HIMSS is really important. We also come home with new lenses, the new questions that people are asking to further understand and be curious about the work we do every day. A lot of us get in our routines. We're doing the same thing. And the value of those being at HIMSS and bringing it back is to see something differently and approach a problem differently. We've been stuck trying to implement bulk FHIR and it's not working, and we're learning everybody else is having the same experience, which we anticipated we see, but now we can confirm it. So it's a big deal to be able to say, okay, our problem is validated, now let's do something about it. It enables us to get to a next step in what we're doing.
Yeah, well, HIMSS has always been an important moment in the healthcare technology calendar, bringing together all the stakeholders to solve some of our biggest challenges. Yesterday, I attended the Interoperability Forum, and I think there was a little bit of a shift yesterday. It felt like less hype around technology for technology's sake and more urgency around practical implementation. How we take these tools or these guides that we've created and use them to reduce friction in healthcare. So that shift from kind of innovation and theory to execution is going to be hopefully where the real progress happens over the next couple of years.
HIMSS is always a blast. It's about just exciting new innovations that are coming out. It's about seeing old friends and making new connections. And just what I really love about it is just it's probably the best place to just get a pulse on what is really happening in the industry and what are kind of the big themes that people are focused on. And there's always kind of the key words you keep hearing over and over from different conversations, and I think it's there's just always a great energy here and just so many smart people doing really amazing things. So it's exhausting, but it also kind of fills your tank with a lot of excitement. So I love coming every year. One that's coming up in my discussions is, again, as Chief Data and Analytics Officer, a lot of conversations around privacy, security, trust and integrity of the data and compliance with the data, reliability of data sources. There's been a lot of activity in the data world over the last year since last year's HIMSS, and so I'd say in the data discussions, it's really a lot around trust and integrity and reliability of the data. Pretty common themes in my discussions.
The personal and professional relationships one has cultivated over time is invaluable. Again, coming together with like-minded people who are equally passionate about health IT, the opportunities it presents. And for us in particular, interoperability is, of course, a mainstay. It's just tremendous, the richness of the conversations you have just organically, not even scheduled meetings, but to just be able to tap into the brain trust of our entire industry, basically under one roof is just invaluable. And it's also very validating, having come to HIMSS for many, many years and been in health IT really my entire career. It's so fulfilling to be able to see this evolution of my career, see the evolution of our industry, and to still realize the value of how much our community has to offer and how much I learn each and every day. And it's just, there's nothing like it. There really isn't. And it's just an incredible opportunity.
So from Anna and her hugs and high fives to Lynn and, the energy she gets from HIMSS, to Marianne and her, years of coming here and the progress that she sees that maybe not everybody else sees. Those are some really, really, enlightening comments. What do you guys think about that? Brian, let me start with you first. What's your take on what Anna, Lynn, or Marianne Yeager said about what they're finding to be valuable about attending HIMSS?
So from my perspective, this is always the peak of the Gartner hype cycle, where things are, here today, maybe gone next year, maybe working next year, maybe still being worked on next year. It's a signal as to where the marketplace is going, and an important signal to understand where things are headed. From my perspective, life sciences, one of the biggest challenges in interoperability is passing information between providers to drive to consistency and an expeditious diagnosis of a patient, maybe with a rare disease. There are patients with autoimmune diseases that have to go see 4 specialists to get diagnosed, and that can take 4 years to make all that happen. And that's a travesty. And interoperability and FHIR and being able to pass information back and forth and reliability of those data sources is really critical to those activities to speed that process up. So I look forward to the great strides that the industry is going to make. I'm hoping that the trough of disillusionment, as they say in the Gartner hype cycle, is not as deep as some people may fear, and that we get through it into a practical, ongoing exchange of information.
So interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, Vanessa, please.
I just love how Brian's talking about the Gartner hype cycle, and it's so relevant to HIMSS, right? It's so exciting. There's so many new booths, and all these people have these huge innovations, and will they be here next year or not? It's a very realistic perspective, and I appreciate it. And I think that, was it Nelson Mandela that said, like, don't measure me on my success, but on how many times I get back up after I fail? Or I'm paraphrasing clearly, but I think that some of these innovations that don't make it to next year are still a really powerful message, right? HIMSS brings 30,000 people, give or take 10,000, together, and everybody's working towards in essentially the same goal of trying to improve healthcare with technology. And that's a really powerful hype, right? And I think that hype is an important thing. Seeing what's going to come out of it. Excellent point, Brian. And, I loved Anna Taylor is such a leader, and she's just, I think she has incredible comments and incredible progress that she can share and perspective. And I loved her hugs, high fives, and handshakes. It's so relevant. And that's a lot of what people do for HIMSS, right? They try to get one-stop shopping with all of their colleagues and friends, and professional and personal, as Marianne said. And, Erin talking about practical implementation, I think is really relevant to what Brian was just talking about too, right? We need to get better at practical implementation so that it doesn't take 4 years to do those things. The one thing I'd add is, HIMSS is also a big catalyst. So many people come as part of being a presenter, whether it's on the main stage or on some of these smaller, interop showcase type things. That's not what they called it this year, but, in the exhibit hall. And really, it's an opportunity for people to stop and reflect and get their messaging right and try to move the needle in that thinking, right? What HIMSS does is really expand beyond and broaden our view. I think it was Anna that talked about people get stuck in their routine, right? And getting out in person and hearing people that aren't necessarily like-minded. So I somewhat disagree with Marianne there, right? We surround ourselves with like-minded people in our day-to-day. And I think conferences like HIMSS and others are moving the needle to think through other perspectives and things we haven't thought of. And that's something I really like about HIMSS.
I agree, and I'm going to interject sort of my observations. A couple of things. One, Vanessa, they did say 28,000, so that's sort of the official number of attendees for this year. You're right, we can give or take a little bit from that. I mean, that's a round number. It might be a little bit less. We know that some people come and just, walk the floor, or sometimes, sit in the bar and talk to people on the side. But, that's about what we had this year. Brian mentioned that he's been coming since 99. I think I've been coming since about 98, 97. At that point, I was working for a technology company, and, we would have a booth or an exhibit, And we would every year sort of build our modifications to our software releases around HIMSS. And so we would take input from customers, we'd take input from, what's going on in the industry, we'd look at things strategically, and we'd build something, that we'd then present at HIMSS. So it really is an innovative, place to come, or, people are really demonstrating innovation and movement forward. So that's one of the things that I love. And it really is, sort of high energy, but I also found myself the day after wiped. It just really wiped me out. And the older I get, I think the more wiped I get. But let's move forward. So I think we can all agree that HIMSS is a quintessential part of health IT, in our industry experience. Attending lets us connect with our colleagues and take the pulse of the industry. Now let's shift to some of the other topics I covered with the other interviewees. The next thing I asked about was their view on FHIR, its adoption, and the challenges and opportunities it offers. We'll hear from Anna Taylor of Multicare, Aaron Weber with CAQH, Marianne Yeager again with the Sequoia Project, and Matthew Holt, who is the founder and author of the Healthcare blog. And if you've ever spoken to him, he's a hoot. Let's hear from those folks.
I think it's being adopted in academia a lot, in research a lot. The at-scale use case of FHIR it serves those things better. And I think if Chuck was to say it's not being adopted, he would say, no, it's worldwide, which it is. It's around the world. In fact, we're talking to whole other countries about what they're doing and how they're adopting it and how they're trying to move it to scale. So I do think that FHIR is going to be and is relevant and is in its early stages of adoption. So I don't think if you're looking at the macro level of things, I think it's adopted in the places that we can easily apply it. It is not adopted at scale yet. And that's what we're all sitting here working on. And I think that's the aha from HIMSS, is that at scale is the hard part. What are the components we need to make this happen? Whether they be policy, whether they be infrastructure, whether they be relationships, we got to figure this out together. And all those lenses makes the answer so much stronger. It's compute. It's electricity. I think if you're a CIO today, if you're not thinking about how you're spending electricity, in 5 years from now, you're going to be paying a huge amount of dollars in your compute. So I think watching and learning how to manage compute, understand where you can spend electricity, where you should spend electricity and where you shouldn't spend electricity, is going to be a mindset and a talent that you're going to need to adopt in the future. So compute is something that is highly relevant. It's probably not a priority. It's a priority to reduce cloud spend. But as you think about where are you going to calculate measures, where are you going to do the AI agent work, that's all electricity being spent. And that is a whole payload of electricity. So shifting our mindset from thinking about purchasing software and subscription services and start thinking about how are we using electricity, that's what's relevant today.
There was a lot of discussion around FHIR yesterday. FHIR's made a lot of progress in improving how healthcare data is shared, especially on the clinical side, but adoption for administrative tasks like verifying insurance or prior authorization remains relatively low. So the CAQH index report tracks adoption of electronic transactions. We've tracked FHIR for prior authorization the last several years. And while we see the potential is there, there's still minimal usage. Now, I think that will change over the next 1 to 2 years as CMS 0057 is implemented. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to make administrative data flow just as smoothly as clinical data. Our core team is working to help the industry use FHIR to simplify and speed up administrative processes. And we're going to continue to track this progress through the CAQH index report.
Certainly, FHIR is next generation, standards approach. We are massive advocates of FHIR-based exchange and interoperability in general. It is a tool in the toolbox. It is a more modernized way to share information. It doesn't necessarily supplant or replace what exists. It complements it, in our view. We are really vested in advancing adoption of FHIR-based exchange. Of course, there's work that we are supporting that to promote that naturally. In terms of the state of FHIR adoption, and I'm talking about in a network context, and of course we work with national networks, LDT vendors, the community, and they're still working and trying to map out how to deploy it. Practically speaking, there's still things to figure out. And so is it ready for prime time? Yes. Is it ready for overnight mass deployment? No. It's like anything with health IT deployment. You start with early adopters, you learn from it, you adapt, you roll it out, you grow it. I think that's where we are, but I think we're more ready than ever.
So Anish Chopra would shoot me if he heard this, but I don't think it matters much whether it's FHIR or CCD or what. There is much more. The data is now moving between organizations, and you know that's happening because now Epic and Particle and other people are fighting about who gets access to what data for what, because you can now get it, and now you can start using it for stuff, right? And for the last 20 years, it was really hard to get data. And now the data is there. You can find, Matthew Holt, Tony Schueth, basic data, whatever. You can move 90% of it. You can get access to it very easily, comparatively. And now we're fighting what actually to do with the data and what's that, having access to data, what does that mean? So FHIR is a big part of that, but it's not all FHIR. And, it's much better. I think there are other types of data that's going to come in, not just medical record data, but other types of data that are kind of coming in. Genomics, personal apparatus, wearables, all that kind of stuff. And there's going to be more and more of a liquid data platform going into the home, which is what I've been talking about forever, so that you can monitor chronically your people much better. But I'm on the data moving around side, I'm pretty optimistic. What I'm not so optimistic about, which is not in this question, is does that blow up the way we have structured our organizations? Because right now, we still have big hospitals who aren't that interested in anything else that's going on outside their own organization, inside their own, and the bits where they make money in their own organizations, which are the high intensity, the cardiac cath suite, the neurosurgery suite, and the operating suites, the general surgery suite, and the orthopedic suite, where all the money gets made. And we still haven't figured out how do you create an organization that will look after people everywhere as a population. Okay, you have Kaiser, but nobody else has figured it out. Even Kaiser hasn't really figured it out.
While all interviewees acknowledge the importance of FHIR, Marianne and Aaron were more optimistic about its progress, particularly in clinical data sharing. In contrast, Anna Taylor pointed out that FHIR adoption is still in its earliest stage and running into scalability challenges. And Matthew noted ongoing challenges in data access and usage. I heard another theme start to appear in the response to this question related to data quality, but we can get into that later. First, let me ask you to respond to these perspectives. Vanessa, I'll start with you again here, since you're deeply involved in the FHIR community. Do you agree with some of these points, and what would you add from your own experience?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So I thought there were a lot of great points from each of those interviewees. Overall, FHIR being a tool in a toolbox, as Marianne said, and there's been a lot of significant steps. It's ready for prime time. It's in early stages of adoption. It does have world recognition. I know that from my experience on the Gravity Project. We get inquiries from Chile and Canada, and actually at HIMSS this week, I was approached by Taiwan, a representative. And so, there is a lot of interest in this innovation, this modern technology, whether it be FHIR or other standards that are built in an open way, open source standards, as well as just, leveraging web-based modern technology APIs, right? I think that healthcare is moving forward, slow and steady wins the race, hopefully, right? And so, turn it on overnight. Totally agree with Marianne. We need to take an iterative process, right? Let's implement implement with specific use cases, specific business problems, and start to build on those successes and learn from them, building on all of the work that's been done over many, many years, right? It's not like we're ripping and replacing here. It's an additive process to what we have today. And I totally agree with all of that when it comes to FHIR. We do see the data moving, as Matthew pointed out. I think that's a really important thing, right? The questions are around the rules and regs on, information blocking and what the implications are of that and who do I need to share with. And, as Brian mentioned earlier, provider to provider and what that looks like, as we think about networks and talking about for treatment versus operations and payment and what that's going to look like, right? There's a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to moving data around, and I agree with all of that. The one thing that I do want to call out that I found fascinating and new is, the electricity cost and thinking about how you're leveraging your data centers and moving data and exchanging data in a more modern way to reduce electricity costs. That's a really broad way of thinking when you're putting your strategy together for using FHIR and modern technologies within your existing stack. I wonder how many folks are really thinking through that when they're putting their strategies together. And of course, Erin pointed out a very important thing that we're seeing at Point of Care Partners very regularly with clients is, how to implement in the best way possible the 0057 prior authorization regulation and leveraging FHIR from the Da Vinci implementation guides that have been put forth. And so, we see a lot of work in the Project Trebuchet and also with our private clients really navigating how to adopt that new technology within their tech stack. So very relevant comments from our interviewers, and I agree.
And Brian, I wonder how you agree, or if you agree, and how could FHIR be leveraged in activities important to life sciences like clinical research, digital health programs, or early identification of patients for testing or treatment?
I love the idea of FHIR and its capabilities to exchange information. We're still in the early days. We know from our app development of FHIR-based apps using standard APIs that it's great to be able to say, here's where the data should be. And then when you go look for it, it's not there, right? And so it's somewhere else. So there's still some governance issues between providers and between any organizations to be able to identify pieces of information that are going to be there, be what you expect. We were expecting a number, and it turns out there's a word there. There's a lot of work to be done, but you aren't going to be able to do any of that without having a structure in place. So I think demonstrating that structure, one use case at a time, is vital to the increase of this use and interoperability. I think that clinical research is held to a pretty high standard of the accuracy of the information and being able to make sure that it's complete and so forth. And that really has a ways to go, I think, in the implementation. It's almost like custom interfaces when you're working between it. You have the right structure, but is it going to work for us in this particular scenario with this organization versus another organization versus another? And the same for digital health. As digital health programs spin up, nobody wants something to be 85% accurate. That's just not the standard that we're looking for. So there's challenges there to make sure that that information in digital programs is complete and accurate as possible to drive whether it's a treatment decision or a testing decision or identifying patients for further follow-up.
I couldn't agree more. So the next question is related to AI. I asked them to talk about realistic uses of AI versus overhyped promises, or what, Brian, I've heard you call magic over the years. Not to spoil the surprise, but you'll hear more about data quality come up in these responses.
Well, I can tell you from personal implementation at Multicare, we thought one was going to be a home run and it was a first base hit. And that's clinical, converting something into a clinical note for a physician. What we learned was the real win out of that experience was understanding that If you are a bad clinical note taker, you're gonna propagate that through AI. If you're good, you're gonna propagate that through AI. So being able to adopt AI into the culture for it to be consumable for human beings is something that we need to look deeply at the entire system that it's supporting. AI is a tool. It's going to augment your intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. So I think our experience with AI, little overhyped from the aspect of that it will solve world peace. It's actually that the system is going to solve world peace, and that system includes culture and governance and adaptability and flexibility and learning new things. We all have these iPhones or Samsung phones or Pixels, whatever they are. We have these appendages. Let's just call them our appendage. They weren't our appendage, and now they are. But AI is going to be one of those adoption curves that comes quickly. And one of the most important things to be considered is how the human interacts with it.
I do think AI has the potential to transform and make healthcare more efficient, especially on the administrative side. If you think of things like ambient listening, documentation review, can really help streamline claims processing, prior authorization, and provider credentialing. Helping doctors get in-network faster so patients can access care sooner. It can also support clinicians by providing better insights, but I think the hype is maybe fully autonomous AI making medical decisions and things like that. Healthcare is too complex and too human-centered for that to be realistic anytime soon. I think too, perhaps chatbots replacing human interactions in patients' care. Really, technology should enhance and not remove that personal connection.
AI, of course, is fascinating. We're not really in the direct, trajectory of how AI is going to evolve. We see ourselves as an enabler, really paying close attention to what the needs are to support the use of such technologies in support of our community as a whole. Again, I harken back, it's all about the usability of the data. And for AI to be effective, for any clinical decision making to be effective, you need good data, and that's what we need to focus on.
So I think our interviewees have some good observation on areas where AI is showing real value, including streamlining administrative tasks. Anna Taylor brought up a good point about human and the AI interaction and calling it augmented interaction. And Mary Ann Yeager mentioned data quality and how we need to clean up the data we're using to train on AI. First, I'd ask you both to weigh in on what you're seeing, both related to ways AI is being used and the overhyped or magic promises and the role of data quality. I'm going to change things up a little bit, and I'm going to start with you, Brian, because I know you have some very strong opinions on AI.
So it's interesting. I had a chance to speak with several doctors recently about their use of ambient listening, recording, transcriptions, so forth. And basically their attitude was, I've recorded my interaction with the patient. My hands are clean now. I have done my job. It's up to the equipment, the electronics, the systems and software to figure everything else out. I'm pleased that they're optimistic about that. I just don't think that they're getting the results that they think they're going to get. Maybe they've been promised a little bit more than the systems are capable of having. I also saw some really valuable stuff where a primary care doctor could open up a patient record and a summary of all their specialist activity would appear on the screen magically in front of them. And that seemed like a really good way to use these technologies. That's an improvement, because I don't want to watch my doctor open up a bunch of PDFs from other specialists and search around for information. He spends a lot of time fumbling, looking for things. Be nice to have that together to say, there were no comments from this specialist and there's no need for follow-up from this other specialist, but this specialist found some things that's going to require some additional testing. I think that would be a great way to use that. The idea that he would then do ambient listening for his assessment and patient treatment plan is an interesting one. I saw a demo from one of the major vendors who had a beautiful demo about an interaction with a patient and how it placed all of the orders into a list of orders for that patient. And then they said, oh, by the way, we can't write that back into the EHR. So it was a separate application. And then all of those orders had to be re-entered. And I said, well, so when are you going to be able to write them into EHR X or EHR Y? And they said, we're still working on it. It ain't there yet. So, you know, I think we're headed in the right direction, but really don't have the final plug-in, like the last that last few inches of technology that actually plugs it in and makes it completely useful is still lacking.
Absolutely. Vanessa, I know you have some thoughts on this as well. And in particular, you're kind of an expert on data quality. So I'll let you sort of comment next.
Sure. Thanks, Tony. So I just need to react to what Brian just said about writing back into the EHR, because I think it's a really, it's been a barrier in a lot of places, right? The ability for outside tools to be able to write back into the EHR. And I think that gets into some of the other topics and themes that we saw at HIMSS this year related to patient consent and control of data. And once something is in a medical record, it's very hard to get it out of that medical record, and really giving appropriate consent and identity management controls in place. But I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later. Coming to AI, you know, I thought our interviewees had a lot of really great comments. You know, the importance of garbage in, garbage out is how I would summarize some of what Anna Taylor was saying related to, you know, the clinical notes not being, if you don't take good notes, AI isn't going to make them magical and beautiful, right? To use the word magic as Brian did. And so I think that's a really important point, right? And that's where data quality comes in, Tony, which is, you know, you can't, AI is a tool, right? Augmentative is a good word. And, you know, keeping humans where humans are needed, and leveraging AI to help humans do their job better, rather than saying, okay, AI, your turn, I think is an important part to any AI strategy that's essential to success in AI. As an industry, we're going to make mistakes. I think we all know that. Everybody's talking about AI. It's definitely a hype. AI is also not new, right? I was doing machine learning 10 years ago at analytics companies and building out algorithms, training algorithms with data, leveraging how to make computers work for you, right? That's all precursors to what we're talking about in AI now. So plenty of people have been doing this for a long time. I think it's just raised its forefront because of tools like Chat GPT and others that have really elevated how AI can be used, and how we deploy it in healthcare needs to be a collective effort. So, you know, the Sequoia project, Marianne commented some really great stuff, Chai, and, you know, other opportunities throughout the ecosystem to really bring experts together and folks that are needing to use AI into collaborative conversations to really define the best strategies for AI with use cases in mind. As Brian points out, there's a lot of points and errors and opportunities for failure, right? How do we get beyond those? Well, we need to work together to make it happen. And that's a little bit of what Anna was saying as well. So looking forward to working with people on AI. I think it's a good opportunity for our industry to use this tool to help humans do what they do best.
Absolutely.
Oh, and I just want to say on the policy side quickly, sorry to interrupt, Tony, but, you know, there's been so much policy, right? I think we heard from someone over 700 state proposals last year, right? And our federal landscape has a very different view than our previous administration did. And, you know, some of my colleagues know much more about this than I do. But I think that there is a lot of importance of sort of monitoring where our federal and state policy is headed with AI and how strategies can be implementing those as well.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that comment. But in the interest of time, we're going to need to wrap up. So what I'd like to do is ask you each for kind of 30 seconds of anything that we haven't sort of covered that you observed at HIMSS and want to bring into this discussion. And Vanessa, let's let you go first, and then we'll have Brian pitch in, and then we'll sort of wrap things up.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, HIMSS is a little bit of a catalyst for driving innovation in our industry, encourage everyone to step back from their day-to-day, think more strategically and innovative, and, recognize the role of policy and regulation as a driver, but not the only driver, and really think strategically about their business goals, their community's health, and how they can improve overall health, reduce cost, improve quality, and use this technology to advance those objectives. And we're here to help.
Brian, do you have you have 30-second, sort of last thoughts?
Sure. I think that, one of the things I came away with was the opportunity for life science companies who do hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of research into what motivates patients to go for a treatment or to be involved in a treatment, and continue on treatment, and understand what their motivations are. How do we get that into these AI models, whether it's local content that they can use, and to help prompt better discussions between providers and patients by having those providers hit on those key points that are going to motivate patients to stay on. The pharmaceutical company is aligned with the provider and once the treatment has been selected, in driving that forward and making sure that that patient stays on therapy and has a successful therapy. And there's a lot of abandonment still in the marketplace. There's a lot of patients who don't follow up or get lost in a prior authorization maze and don't understand what their treatments are going to be like over time. And we need to be able to provide that better sources of information about what's going to make those patients be successful and have successful treatment plans.
Absolutely. It's all about the patients. And one of the things that I always say is that we're all patients. So listen, it's time to wrap things up. In closing, I'd like to thank my co-hosts for taking a moment out of their busy, demanding schedules to participate in today's episode. It's been fun to be able to hang out with all of you and talk shop. If you're a new listener, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you use, including Healthcare Now Radio. We also post videos of our podcast episodes, sometimes longer versions, on POCP's YouTube channel. And don't forget, Health IT is a dish best served hot.
We look at consent management as just one more aspect of a very rigorous data management infrastructure that we have put in place. We've spent, a lot of resources, a lot of investment, particularly over the last year and a half, modernizing our data infrastructure, building out data quality, data integrity, data provenance, lineage, privacy controls, all of the words around data management, because we see consent as just really very similarly to how we manage our data contracts and our agreements with our customers around data usage rights. Patient consent is really just one more flavor of data usage rights. And as regulations, both state and federal, are evolving around both patients' access to data, patients' empowerment to share their data, and also patient empowerment to restrict their data, it becomes incredibly important that we have an infrastructure in place, both from a policy perspective, as far as how do we as a company, approach usage of data, and also the technical and data infrastructure in place to manage that, because it's incredibly complex. Right. So we've really started at the foundational level of building out all of the technical infrastructure, the policy infrastructure, and then really building that into all of our product development, all of our legal and regulatory and contractual arrangements with our partners to really be able to comply with the regulations, but also really comply with the intent of both individual patients where that is at play, or our partners on the network, to make sure we're honoring all those data usage rights according to the stakeholders.
So there are one or two technologies that I've been told about and introduced to that, should give this all back to consumer. There's a ton known about every consumer out there in the world. You tell someone a phone number, an address, one other data point, I can probably track down who you are, putting federated databases together. We've got to put those in the hands of consumers so they can manage them. Right now, credit agencies and police agencies and others are, intelligence agencies, obviously, we've all got that stuff. healthcare, I think, is sleeping on what's known about people, and should be able to use that stuff more. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to figure out much more quickly and easily who needs to be in a clinical trial, who needs to be, who could be, who's potentially available for what type of care, who's not getting the stuff they need, who is not doing the things they should be doing. We have that data is flowing around. It's just we haven't figured out a methodology for getting patient consent to manage it, or for putting it in the right places to generate activity and action. So I think overall there's a huge amount of potential there, but I don't see healthcare organizations. It's back to the old problem, is that they want, everyone wants the high-cost orthopedic case and the neurosurgery suite in the cardiac cath lab and the high-paying commercial rate, but nobody's thinking longitudinally about patient care and the whole patient and trying to stop that stuff before it happens. And we should have better handles on people's, informative bathrooms, on how they're sleeping, on all kinds of stuff. But we also have to bring people along with the consent management and understanding of how they do that and how they control their data. And there are one or two players out there who've offered to figure out how you can control your data and even maybe monetize your own data, but they haven't really got anywhere so far. And we're still struggling with people saying you can't see your record because of HIPAA.
Washington State has My Health, My Data laws that are in place. So we are looking at this more broadly than maybe, say, a state without that type of law. New York is the other one to implement this type of policy change. But we're thinking about, where does health data live in general? It doesn't just live in the EMR, it lives in the YMCA, it lives in your transactions, it lives in multiple places. So being able to store and digitally store consent is going to be really important in our future. So we've been thinking about, what's the infrastructure that we need to do that? What are the legal documents, the things we have to agree to in order to make that happen? And how could we do that leveraging open standard APIs in the future? Because that's going to get us to scale in delivering consent and identity. Those two things are going to be keys to the future. If you don't have those two things, sharing data is going to get really hard, and there's still going to be lots of trust and legal issues if you don't have those things in place. Many of the services that we use outside of healthcare, Fitbit, Apple Health, all of those things, you're consenting by just having an account, and that's included in the user agreement, everything that you sign up for. So, or hit that magic button that makes you scroll all the way down and you're so annoyed about it. But all of that information is something that healthcare services is going to have to do too. So putting that workflow in healthcare is going to be very important in our future, and it's certainly on a roadmap that is nearer than farther away.
We don't operationalize consent management, but we very well recognize that privacy and consent is absolutely essential in today's environment. We facilitated and are facilitating a work group focused on privacy and consent in a modern context, published a white paper in January, put it out for stakeholder feedback. And, we believe that this is an area that's ripe for really thoughtful consideration about how do we understand and navigate this newer landscape, and how do we operationalize it? So how do we have a computable consent? How do we support data segmentation for privacy? And how do we, form these things in a way that our entire community really understands, embraces, and can support? So for us, it's a really, really important issue. We typically don't focus on white papers and thought pieces because we're so focused on making operational impact and progress. But this is an issue our community said we have to get ahead of it. It has to be informed and shaped by practical considerations. And that's why we really stepped into providing, we hope, a leadership role and bringing the community together on that issue.
Well, at CAQH, protecting sensitive healthcare data is a top priority as at any technology company. As discussions around patient data privacy and control grow, we're really committed to ensuring that the data we manage is secure, it's accurate, and accessible only to the right stakeholders. That's why we've invested in strong security measures, including multi-factor authentication, high trust certification, to ensure the integrity of our provider and member data. I think effective consent management is really about balancing security with seamless access to information, and this was discussed quite a bit yesterday. The industry needs solutions that protect patient data, but also enable interoperability for better care.
Is it a challenge to stay on top of interoperability regulations and the flurry of activity with FHIR accelerators? Email us at interoperoutlook@pocp.com to learn more about our Interoperability Outlook subscription monitoring service.